But it's going to be May. You want to do it? It's going to be May. No.
Hey, we can sing some Justin Timberlake.
It's going to be May.
Welcome to another episode of Dishonorable Mention. As always, we are joined by communications specialist, Dr. Carla Mastracchio. Say hello, Carla.
Hey, y'all. What's up?
Also joining us, as always, communications director for Ruth's List, Becca Teeter. Say hello, Becca.
Hello, Becca.
And also joining us, as always, State Representative Chris Latvala. Hello, Chris.
Good evening.
And I, of course, am Ernest Hooper, a friend of Tampa Bay, and we are very excited to be with you on this episode. We have a very special guest coming up in a few minutes, Heath Fogelman from Bridges, who's going to tell us about a really interesting program. But first, let's talk about Joe Biden. Joe Biden last Friday went on Morning Joe and issued a strong denial about allegations that he sexually assaulted Tara Reade. Becca, what did you think about Vice President Biden's appearance on Morning Joe? Did he convince you that he's innocent?
I don't use interviews to determine innocence or guilt, so I can't answer that straight up the way you asked it. What I can tell you is I can answer it in two parts. Number one, I believe anytime somebody alleges an offense such as that, it deserves to be examined and stop. I don't care what their party persuasion is. Does that mean we do a full court press investigation to everything? Not always, but there should be processes in place where it's not sometimes. There should be some consistency. Speaking strictly politically and the way he managed himself in the interview with Mika, everybody should go ahead and start and get ready for 4 more years of Donald Trump on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Becca, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So on a scale of 1 to Prince Andrew, how badly did he handle himself? And I have not seen the interview.
I don't know. I mean, Chris, we should bring in on this together because Chris and I like to analyze, across the aisle, different folks. I thought he started out strong, but when he got asked like a second or third time, he just kind of fell off the rails. So if I had shut the interview off at 2 minutes, I would have given him a B. Watching the whole thing, I give him a D, and that's simply out of kindness.
Well, and Mika just kept railing on him about releasing the documents from his office at the University of Delaware. And I thought that Mika, was a pretty strong interviewer. And she interviewed him by herself. And, I thought that, the way that
the way he discussed the topic,
the way that he treated her, in his answers, I thought was fine. He showed her respect and so forth. And he didn't attack her or anything like that. But, he was very non-committal and basically saying that he wouldn't open up, the papers that he had at the University of Delaware that his office had, because all of his senatorial papers and all the records are at Delaware, the University of Delaware. And
Chris, did you feel like, did it feel like once they got past the most basic questions, like did you assault this person, he wasn't prepared to answer them?
Yeah,
like it seemed like the Delaware thing threw him for a loop, which I don't know why he was ill prepared for that or came across as such.
I mean, just based on my, just me watching it, it seemed like he wasn't prepared to answer that question. You have spent more time in the field than I have, but it just, to me, it had received enough media coverage that he had to address it, because it's, multiple media outlets started talking about it and interviewed her old neighbor and other people. And there was a video that was uncovered of her mom that was on Larry King in the 1993, where her mom was talking about her daughter having issues with a prominent senator and other things. And so I think that he definitely had to have an interview at some point, because up until then he hadn't talked about it.
Hoop, do you have any? Did you see it at all?
I just think we're talking about an election that's going to take place 5 months from now. Well, early voting will probably start in late October. 5 to 6 months, that's an eternity in politics. And I just don't think this story has legs. And I don't understand how President Trump can use it to his advantage when he himself has received numerous allegations, not just one, but multiple allegations of sexual impropriety. The Trump campaign may try to use this against Vice President Biden, but I'm not at all convinced that we need to get ready for 4 more years of President Trump. I think a lot more will have to happen in the next 5 to 6 months to put President Trump in a comfortable position. Not the least being bringing COVID-19 under control, which we are far from.
But I don't think Trump has used it against him. And when Trump was asked, he even mentioned that it could be, an untrue allegation. And he said, I've had plenty of untrue allegations against me. And so he, sort of took up for Joe Biden. And so, I think the problem that, will arise for Democrats is they spent, all this time going after Kavanaugh and the Me Too movement and the Believe All Women.
Yeah, that's a novel idea.
And then, now when it's, one of their, own Democratic nominees that has an allegation against them, now it's, we believe Joe Biden. And on Friday, instead of Believe All Women trending on Twitter, it was I Believe Biden. And, not too long ago, right before Joe Biden announced for president, if y'all remember, there were different allegations about not in him assaulting women or anything like that, but being inappropriate and invading space of women, and multiple women came out and said that he sniffed their hair or
kissed them or one of the things Chris and I talked about after the interview, and Hooper, this is what I must not have been clear on. I don't think he handled the interview well. I feel like Mika she interviewed him staunchly and directly, and he couldn't handle it. If 10 more women come forward and assault him, we have proved that the American public will elect somebody who commits the act of sexual assault. I'm not saying that's why, if in fact he has ever done such a thing, that's not why I don't think he's going to be elected. The reason why I don't think he's going to be elected is because he fell apart in an interview that was not hostile. And when he goes to debate Trump, he's going to fall apart. Unless something happens radically, and I can't imagine somebody with that much public service is going to suddenly ascend to that capacity. Christopher and I had a really good conversation after the interview. I think Joe Biden has been a great public servant. He has done a lot of good things. That doesn't mean he's a good candidate. It also doesn't mean that he hasn't committed the act of sexual violence. But being a good candidate can get you elected. I think Donald Trump is a fascinating and very interesting candidate, and he has electrified a painfully large part of this country. He's a good candidate. I think he's a terrible leader. But at the end of the day, I think unless Biden's trajectory changes, he's in real trouble.
And I don't know.
I couldn't disagree with you more. I think
I gave to Cancer Society today on Giving Tuesday.
Hey, we appreciate that at the American Cancer Society. But speaking as a friend of Tampa Bay, I recall Vice President Biden handling himself well in debates, in vice presidential debates when he was Barack Obama's running mate. And, unless his skills have diminished significantly, I think he's going to be fine. In the debates during the primary, he didn't perform great, but he didn't embarrass himself. And I don't consider President Trump to be a good candidate. Yes. A good debater? Not necessarily. He basically tries to reduce everything to name calling. And I think Vice President Biden will be able to prepare for someone who's just going to stand there and basically call him Sleepy Joe over and over again. I just think, and then you have to consider the math. And if Biden picks the right running mate, he is trending in the battleground states right now. All the polling indicates that he is either leading or gaining ground on President Trump. Again, I just think President Trump's on the defensive.
Well, and there may be some truth to that. And I'll tell you, gosh, I almost stuttered. I got so carried away there. This, I think, is an illustration that I believe many moderates will come to the defense of Joe Biden because people want to discredit folks who come forward with these allegations. True, most of the time, false, some of the time. And so I think in some ways, this allegation with the broader American public, as twisted as that sounds, could make people feel like, man, if I don't show up for Joe, we're in real trouble. So, I mean, I could even make that argument, but I also believe that women, to the most of the American public, are not treated the same way that men are.
Yeah. I will tell you that I think Joe Biden 4 years ago would have beat Donald Trump. I don't know if Joe Biden this year can do it. And I will also say that, I don't know if Joe Biden did what he was accused of, and I'm not going to say that he did. He is due and deserves due process, and everybody accused of wrongdoing is due process and deserves due process. And I know what it's like when somebody's accused of something and they don't receive due process. And I think I've said this before on the podcast, but if I haven't, there's not it would be hard for me to find a single thing that I agree with Al Franken on. But he was somebody that was accused of something and was pretty much run out of town in Washington and in the United States Senate pretty much by his own party, and not really given a chance to defend himself. And many of the people that ran him out, like the Kirsten Gillibrands and some of the other female senators, did it, to make a point and so forth, are the same people that are rushing to Joe Biden's defense, and I think that, there's a big double standard, and that's the problem that I have, is the hypocrisy of, the convenience of, the Me Too movement, when it's politically, convenient. What are you laughing at? I'm taking up for one of your.
I'm not laughing at it, but you're calling my life's work politically convenient.
No, I'm saying, but it's politically convenient for Democratic senators, like Kirsten Gillibrand. and the female senators that are on the short list to be VP, every single one of them have pretty much taken Joe Biden's defense, and which is fine because he deserves due process. But these are the same people that ran Al Franken out of town, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that he was kicked out because there was a picture of him kissing somebody while they were sleeping or something like that he was doing as a comedic stunt, which is highly inappropriate. But I don't know if that's a reason why you should lose a Senate seat and not have a chance to explain yourself.
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, number one, I think the vast majority of people are having the wrong conversation. We're talking about should we believe all women? Should this disqualify a candidate, et cetera, and so forth? I think the conversation should be, what do we value and how do we want to treat the issue of sexual violence, which of course doesn't just affect women, but men and children, but oftentimes women. We have to decide as a society if it matters to us, and not when it's convenient, as you mentioned. And now I'm understanding the context in which you said it, and so thank you. Not when it's used as a political lap. Not when we don't know the person, so we don't care, or we have to have, if it's a value, then values don't change based on circumstance. Values are something that are intrinsically a part of who you are. And if it's a part of our culture to say, we think sexual assault is wrong and we will look at it seriously, and stop. If we don't care, stop pretending to care for political gain and just be honest and be like, we don't really care. We know what happens, and that's the price of admission to pay to being a woman in America. I just wish we would stop lying about it or take it seriously.
I don't know if those two extremes are exactly fair.
Well, as somebody who spent 17 years working in this industry, I think I've watched how this plays out. So it may not be an exact replica of what we should look at society as a society, but to some extent, there is some real truth to it. Like, it shouldn't be political, and unfortunately, it often is.
No, I would agree with that, but we've seen in the Me Too movement a number of high-profile men who have lost their jobs, who have been publicly humiliated. And in the case of Harvey Weinstein, we've seen a very powerful figure end up in jail.
Or if you're Jeffrey Epstein, you get murdered in prison. But
that is true.
For another time.
And even though he was murdered, I will say he deserved to be murdered. So that was a justifiable homicide.
I abstain from commenting on that. Hooper, I'm sorry I jumped all over your thoughtful commentary. This issue is obviously very near and dear to my heart.
No, I understand that it's near and dear to your heart. I know you've devoted your life's work to it. And I respect where you're coming from. But, I think you're looking at this very broadly in terms of this country's values, whereas I'm looking at it in a very narrow, what does it mean for this presidential election? To me, the presidential election is a subset of the broader circle that you are discussing. And I think within that broader circle, this particular allegation, in my opinion, is not going to have enough of an impact to derail Vice President Biden's chances of winning unless the DNC launches an intensive investigation.
They will not.
I don't think they will.
So I have a question for y'all. Do y'all think this changes any numbers when it comes to suburban women?
No.
Who are usually
not if he's running against Trump. I mean, we're talking about one allegation versus multiple allegations.
I believe 26 is the most current number.
I thought 27, but cool. That's fine.
Yeah, I thought it was 17, but we're talking about a president who, was caught on tape saying something vile and disgusting about women.
But then 3 weeks later, he won.
I understand that, but who was he running against?
Chris, can you please not say that again? Some of us are still grieving.
And
that's why I'm saying you got to look at this in kind of a focus perspective. He won. He didn't win the popular vote. Let's point that out first and foremost. And secondly, he won because his opponent, Hillary Rodham Clinton, did not run a very good campaign. And I know a lot of people want to debate that, but as the great Jim Rome would say, scoreboard. She lost. Therefore, she didn't run a good campaign.
I'm so proud of myself. I know who Jim Rome is. I feel like I should get
Who is Jim Rome, Becca?
He's a sports commentator. He had a show on ESPN forever and a radio show.
I am very good.
I'm so proud of
that was my first job, by the way. Just not to toot my own horn here, but not to toot my own horn.
You worked for Jim Rome as well?
With Jim Rome.
I swear, every episode Carla reveals, between talking about Deneen and Carla revealing name a job you didn't know she had. I mean, we have so much to reveal at our 100th episode.
My first job, I worked for a sports station. That was affiliated with ESPN. It was the ESPN affiliate. And I worked with Jim Rome, and I also worked with a news station that was affiliated with Glenn Beck, and he was in Tampa at the time.
Yeah,
so
prior to that, Carla was an underwater welder.
I was. Oh my God, I was so good at it. I was really smart now. You don't even know.
That was good.
If you don't get that reference, I don't want to know you. Like, if you don't get my Mindy Kaling references, like, I don't want to be friends with you ever.
No, we're with you. We're with you. Carla, what do you think? Can this allegation derail Vice President Biden's chances?
No, but I think the Democratic Party are a bunch of freaking hypocrites. And I think it's annoying because the first conversation you should have is, okay, if we put this guy up, is anything going to come out? And if the answer is yes, he might have sexually assaulted a couple of women, then you should get a plan in place. And then, oh, by the way, maybe a year ago with the Kavanaugh hearings, you should think about, okay, we're going to choose this direction. We're going to go with this messaging. If the same thing happens to our guy or girl that we put up, what are we going to do? Like, those conversations should have been happening a year and a half ago.
Well, and you know what's really interesting about the Kavanaugh situation? I don't think they ever had a real chance to stop him from being appointed to the Supreme Court.
No, and that's the thing. And Kavanaugh's relatively moderate. So when that whole thing was going on, I'm like, interesting. In terms of strategy.
And they made his yearbook an issue.
What?
They made his yearbook an issue. They were reading excerpts of his yearbook.
I mean, I just don't look. Okay. I just get really frustrated because I can believe somebody and still want to win. And I think I'm really honest about that. I'm very upfront about that. I've been upfront about that on social media. I've been upfront about that on Twitter. Like, I can believe this woman and understand her pain and understand all those things. But this guy is the Democratic nominee. So now what are we going to do? So now my strategy hat kicks in, and I try to figure out how we're going to handle it. So I don't think it's a question of believe or not believe. And I believed the woman who accused Dr. Ford, who accused Kavanaugh, but that doesn't change my opinion. And
Do you know
maybe I don't know. Maybe I have a little that little black emoji heart is like really my heart, but I just don't. I don't care, and I care that someone has been sexually assaulted. I care that someone has been put through emotional duress. But at the end of the day, it's about strategy. And now, how are you going to handle it? And that's where I put my hat. And I say this as somebody who has been on the receiving end of unwanted sexual advances and an abusive relationship and all of those things. And I don't know that I'm the only one that can say this on this podcast. I hope I am. But, I'm the person that has had, been dragged up through 2 flights of stairs by my ponytail. So I really do take it to heart when people, it's so hard for me to even talk about, when people want to talk about their own personal experiences, because I do believe them. But for me as a strategist, it's not, do I believe you or do I not believe you? Because I do believe you. But okay, now that we have this out there, how are we going to handle it? If that makes any sense.
Has anyone seen this counter Plan B proposal of Hillary becoming the nominee?
Oh, stop.
With Barack as her vice presidential running mate?
I don't think that's constitutional.
I don't
for
think that's
him to
legal.
serve as vice president.
I just saw it out there. Hey, I'm not saying I'm for it at all, but it has been put out there.
I'm just happy that President Obama was identified as the president in the Last Dance documentary and not as the former Chicago resident like he was in the first episode.
That's awesome.
Good. That was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah.
He showed up again on Sunday night and they called him the president.
All right. Well,
that's good. He's actually giving the commencement address. Did you see that for the graduates?
Where at?
I think it's just online.
Yeah,
I think it's like a general commencement address.
Hey, so before we bring on our special guest, Heath Fogelman, let's just talk quickly about where we are with COVID-19 here in Florida and in the nation. We're going to judge our elected officials on a continuum. How do you think Governor DeSantis is doing right now in terms of helping Florida handle COVID-19?
Well, I am proud that he asked for a formal investigation on Rick Scott's boondoggle of the DEO website that the state spent $77 million on in 2013. And there is speculation and evidence that it may have been designed to not work on purpose.
I hate that guy.
To keep.
I want a T-shirt that says Rick Scott. I hate that guy.
I really do. It's like every time I hear his name, it's followed by something that I'm like, oh, I hate that guy. And I don't want that to be the case. Like, I want to like my senators. I want to like my former governors. I want to believe in you, Rick Scott, but you just keep, I hate you. Oh, God, I hate that guy.
And with that, I close, Mr. Speaker.
Well, you talk about politics, and it may have been designed to fail. And Scott has made no secret of his disdain for unemployment benefits, and they wanted to lower it so that influential companies in the state of Florida did not have to spend as much. On the other hand, let us not forget that Governor DeSantis and Senator Scott are political rivals who are both eyeing the White House in 2024. So there are ulterior benefits to Governor DeSantis proving that this computer was designed to fail. I'm not saying that it wasn't. I'm not saying that Governor Scott doesn't deserve some of the blame, but
well, I mean, there's evidence.
I'm not sure Governor DeSantis's actions are altruistic or designed to.
I'm just glad he finally took Nikki Fried's advice.
Yeah, that's been another criticism that he's received, is this lack of desire to work with the agricultural. I always get this wrong. Is it secretary or commissioner?
Commissioner.
And the highest ranking politician that we've ever had on this honorable mention.
I like Nikki a lot. I think she's a really cool person. She's really smart. And I think that she has a long way to go in her career. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I just think in a pandemic, if you are a person who wants to win the White House, I think, you're best served to create a bipartisan spirit around your actions and not be so partisan.
Well, I'm excited. Ruthless, my fine employer and place where I have volunteered for years, was her first endorsement, and she is actually doing a special virtual town hall for us tomorrow that is available. We're basically out of tickets, but if you're a fan of the pod, you just let me know. Actually, this probably won't air before it happens. You just let me know and I'll email you the recording.
Yeah, thanks for that special invitation.
Thank you for that unremarkable buildup that I just provided. Although it's going to be really good. And
do you guys think the nation is faring better now that some states are beginning to lift the social distancing requirements and open back up the economy? Good move or bad move?
It's one of those things where you just get to guess, most scientists have said it's too soon. I tend to trust science, but the amount of people that actually believe that it is all a hoax put on by the Democratic Party to help derail President Trump. I mean, the amount of people that I know who believe that, who have stated that publicly, is number one, alarming. Number two, really, Chris, give more money to the education system in Florida. And three, the fact that anyone thinks the Democratic Party could pull something off like that is
that's what I'm saying. Preach, girl, preach.
I mean, come on, that is not our bailiwick. But
it's sad, but it's not surprising. I mean, they've been making sci-fi movies about people ignoring science for like 70 years.
Steven Spielberg made a movie. It's called Jaws.
Yeah. And the mayor wouldn't listen to Richard Dreyfuss and Roy Scheider. I mean, those plot lines are ripped from reality.
Can I plug my office real quick? So I'm on a team that does like innovation and stuff like that for government clients. And one of the ways in which we teach creative problem solving is by showing that clip from Jaws. So what we do is we show the scene from Jaws where Richard Dreyfuss is like fighting with the mayor and they're talking about, 4th of July and how great it's going to be. And the mayor's like, I want these guys strung up by their Buster Browns, that whole thing. So we show that scene, and a lot of our younger operators have never seen Jaws because they're like 12. And a lot of our older senior leaders, depending on who's in the room, kind of grew up with it. So it's interesting. What we ask them to do is we ask them to draw the problem. No words, and they can't communicate with words when they're in their groups. But we ask them to get on their whiteboards or their butcher blocks or markers or whatever they have available, and we ask them to draw it. And it's amazing the results that come from that exercise, because people are able to kind of look past the partisanness of that scene and see things from different perspectives outside of their own. So I wish we could do that. And I'm not trying to plug my office, not trying to plug my team, my company, any of those things. But like, I really do wish we could send a team like that into lots of offices and lots of levels of government and allow that to take place, because I think it'd be very interesting and people would suddenly become aware of their own biases and their own perspectives in a way that they weren't an hour prior. I don't know.
All right. So, Becca, why don't you introduce our special guest?
So I'd like to say I don't like to do the Pinellas v. Hillsborough, but I'm always really proud when one of the Pinellas residents is doing something amazing. And Heath and I connected some time ago talking about this shared value that we have. When I say we, I mean the collective we, as why this podcast was so important. And 2 years ago today, after spending about a month becoming friends, I announced that I was not going to be running against Christopher in 2018, and
fell for the charm.
That's what it was. I'm still just bedazzled by it all.
My wonderful record.
Yeah, you're a real fighter for women and the disenfranchised. But that Chris and I continued to have so many conversations about how important it was to just have real conversations where there was room for all ideas. I mean, not like let's murder and kill, but all reasonable ideas. And Heath has truly created a platform where we don't want to have everybody as a guest. Happy to have him here, but he has created something where people can, if I may, bridge those gaps and have those conversations. Or maybe they're out in rural Iowa and have never knowingly met somebody who is different than themselves. He's created a space where those conversations can happen so we can break down bias and prejudice. And I'm so pleased to have this super talented, visionary resident of Pinellas County.
727.
727. Thank you for celebrating Chris and his anniversary with us.
Heath, why don't you start out by just telling us a little bit about your program?
Yeah, so you mentioned it before, Bridges. Basically, the concept that we came up with was basically just kind of doing things the exact opposite of other social platforms where you see all the fighting and animosity and echo chambers being developed and that sort of thing. Those are all based on connecting people by their similarities. So my co-founder and I were just talking, how can we do better than that? How we can get people to actually talk to each other? And there's two huge differences. One is Bridges connects you explicitly by your differences. So your difference in politics, religion, race, gender identity, those big key things that sort of define who we are as human beings. You go in, you share whatever you want to about yourself, and then those topics are things you can have a conversation with. The one factor being it's always with somebody who is different than you in that way. So a different religion, a different gender identity, et cetera. So there's that. But the other thing that it does is it then puts you into a one-on-one conversation. So you don't have the echo chamber. You don't have the big following of people who are at once an audience and a posse. And I've tried to do things on Facebook, for example, where I have intelligent and civil discourse with someone on the other side. That's happened many times where even if we can get to the point where we trust each other enough to have a conversation, their posse and my posse are waiting to jump on the other side at the drop of a hat, right? So the whole thing of Bridges is connect with someone who's different than you, get into a one-on-one conversation, have an authentic, out of the spotlight conversation to learn to understand each other and where you're coming from, to sort of rehumanize the other side and learn where they're coming from.
How many people have connected through Bridges?
So we've just launched the app. The platform online has been out there for a while, and there's not a ton of people on it. The app is just launched, so we've probably got 100, 150 people right now that have downloaded the app and are checking it out. We're at that stage now where we've got the solution to this thing that we've heard a million times I've heard it. Every time a politician talks, it seems like they're like, oh, we need to work across the aisle. Every time a candidate talks, every time a talking head or a journalist talks, like, man, we need to talk to people across the aisle better. There's been studies, the American people believe that we're too divided and we need to talk across the aisle. So we know the need and the desire is there for it. Now we've got the solution. So that's where we're at. It's just getting the word out, which I really appreciate you guys having me on to talk about it a little bit, just to spread the word and get people to check it out and give it a try.
And just remind us, where do we just go to the App Store and search Bridges?
Yeah, so you can go to the App Store. What I found in the App Stores is if you search Bridges and even Make Bridges, which is the name of the app, there's a million games about building bridges or not blowing up bridges or whatever, and they all come in first. So the best way to do it is go to our website, makebridges.com. It's got the links to both of the apps right there, whether you're a Apple person or an Android person. And you can click straight through and get them that way. So makebridges.com. Got a little bit about what we do, our mission, and the connections to the apps.
I mean, could this be any more perfect for what we've been trying to do here? I don't, it's like, not like I'm trying to take any, like it's like take a little bit of your dishonorable love home to your friends and family.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like what you guys are doing is great. And it was one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you about it is because you're building bridges across these divides of politics particularly, and I don't know where you all stand on religion, but you've got some differences that you guys talk about all the time in a civil way. You disagree with each other, but you do it in a civil way. That's awesome. So yeah, it's exactly that, and it's about extending that conversation because what you guys are doing is awesome. There are other organizations out there that are doing things, are bringing people together, having conferences about, bridging differences and all that sort of thing. But then when those things are over, what do? You go home and you live your life again and you go back to the same way. Make Bridges is going to be the thing that is going to be on your phone to help you extend those conversations out to the world, ultimately.
Gosh knows we need it during an election season. And I mean, I feel like every political science class, maybe even some U.S. history classes should be using this to help to, challenge some of their, kind of like what Carla was talking about earlier, to help challenge some of their assumptions and to help break down some of these biases that we have. I mean, I will say with all that I am, that my perception of Chris based on Googling him is not who he is as a man and as a legislator. It's not that generic. And I'm a better person for having Christopher in my life and to have those dialogues and perspective. And what a gift that is that he and I both have that. I mean, and we really, other than the fact that we both identify as heterosexual and happen to be, we're white, but, I'm a liberal Jewish progressive feminist.
You are?
And Chris identifies as, Democrat, and Chris identifies as a, especially when we first met, he would have said he very much identifies as an evangelical
Southern
Christian
Fried Republican.
Right. And
nice guy.
You are a very nice guy. And we have really good dialogue. And I think even the first time we hung out, Christopher, didn't we talk about white privilege?
Well, the first time I met Becca was at a charity lunch, and I didn't know who she was, but I noticed that there was this lady that stared at me the entire time and was giving me dirty looks. And I knew that there was somebody named Becca Teeter that had kept tweeting at me and calling me all kinds of names, and to the point that I had muted her on Twitter. And she came up and introduced herself to me afterwards. And then I found out that she was going to run against me. And I knew I had heard that name somewhere. And I went back and I looked, and sure enough, it was the same Becca Teeter that used to tweet at me that I had muted because she was so nasty and rude. And so, being a good, statesman, I
for God's sakes. If I didn't live so close to you, I would wish lightning on your house. I just talked about what a beautiful, like how you're not this caricature of a person, and all you're doing is going, she was mean to me online.
We reached out to her, or I reached out to her, and well, no, she literally bashed me for not going to a protest rally while she was on vacation. But that's besides the point.
Jesus, you've got to get a therapist. You don't do this the way Jews do it. You work this out with a therapist, not on a recording.
But we ended up meeting for lunch, and that first lunch turned into a 3-hour first date. I mean, it was more productive than a lot of my first dates are.
Christopher, that has some undertones that could be misinterpreted.
So, Heath, obviously, Chris and Becca bring the right kind of attitude and tone to this conversation across the aisle. How do you guard against a troll or a pretender getting in on Make Bridges and then becoming disruptive or insulting?
Yeah. So the main way, and I think the most effective way that we have in place is going to be we have community ratings. So when you have a conversation with someone, when you can end that conversation whenever you want to, and when you do, you get a chance to rate that person. 4 simple questions. Basically, were they open-minded? Did they share their views? Were they interested in your views? And would you talk to them again? 1 to 5 stars, that aggregates up to a general community rating. So people who are just on there to troll are going to get bad ratings, and they're going to get washed out. People aren't going to want to talk to someone who's got a 1-star rating. You see the 4s and the 5s. Those are obviously people who are on there for the right reasons. They're open, they're talking, they're answering questions, they're sharing about themselves and so on, and making themselves and the other person better for it, right? Just like Becca and Chris were talking about. So that's going to be the biggest part of it, certainly. There's back-end things we can monitor as well. We'll be doing that. There's if someone's really breaking the rules, making threats, things like that, they can be reported immediately, and we could take action against them through the platform as well. But that community rating is going to be the key thing that really keeps it on the up and up, and lets the good people rise to the top, and the trolls get washed out.
So I'm thinking we should all get on here and see who of the 4 of us will end up with the best rating.
That's so funny. I was thinking in my head, man, I bet my rating will be higher than Chris's.
It could be like an Uber driver.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. And now you know why we're such good friends, because we have the same competitive disorders. That's amazing. Yes, but I do think we should all get on there, and then we can report back what our experience is.
Yeah, that's amazing. And let me know. And again, the app's just launched. We put everything in that we think is right. But anytime you're doing an app and you're doing development, you're always looking for feedback and to better the next version. So we encourage people to get on there, try it, and let us know. I mean, there's contact destinations in there. Hey, this doesn't work, or you could do this better, or whatever. We want that feedback as well.
And does each person who visit or sign up for the app, do you do a survey to kind of gauge where they are on the political spectrum?
They share themselves. So there's the 5 factors I talked about. So you've got politics, religion, gender identity, and race. I'm sorry, sexual. I was confused. It was gender and sexuality and race. So the 5 things. So you've got drop downs on all of those. And again, we've tried to be as inclusive as possible on all of those. Again, I'm sure we're going to get feedback like, hey, you didn't get my gender identity, or you didn't get my religion. And that's fine. We want to hear that. But we tried to make it as broad as possible while still being differences between all of the possible choices. So you pick and choose what you want to share about yourself. Obviously, you have to share at least one thing to have something to connect on. But you can share 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can share whatever you want. And then those are the conversations you'll be able to have.
Is it based, is there like a geographical location thing so it connects people based on their location?
Not yet. That's definitely an innovation. We want to expand beyond those 5 things. We started with those 5 because we feel like those really are factors that define who you are as a person, how you see the world, and how the world sees you, right? So all of those things are really defining of who we are as people. But there's so many more things, geography being one of them. It could be income level, education level, jobs you've had. There's lots of other factors that we can work in there where there are differences that people could connect over. So we will be expanding that later. Right now, the geography isn't a factor, but we definitely want to get there because we'd love to have a situation where, a challenge throughout talk to somebody, one person in every state, or who can talk to the person furthest away from them and, have awards or something like that, to get people engaged even more on those kind of things. So that'll be coming.
Yeah, that would be like fascinating to talk to someone in the Middle East or,
right.
In other countries.
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about. Like, if you want to know what it is to be a Muslim or why they believe what they believe, or a Jewish person or a black person or a transgender person or whatever, like, the best way to know is not to look at your social media or even your mainstream media or whatever biased media you're looking at to get the picture of that person. Go ask someone who is that, whatever that is. So that's what we want to do with Bridges, is have all representation of people that are willing to talk about it and enlighten people and help them understand what they don't already. And we think the net result is ultimately going to be, no matter how different the person is from you, you're going to find you have a lot more in common than you do differences. And you're going to sort of rehumanize that other side that probably, or maybe has been demonized within your world.
And then they're going to spin it off into a dating app where you can.
That's
where the money is.
Location.
That's on the radar. Yeah, opposites attract. It'll come somewhere down the line. Quite sure.
I was going to start talking to people within a 10-mile radius. See how I do.
That's amazing.
There's a lot, and that's another thing when you make an app like this is we've got a vision for what it can do and why it exists and what we want to accomplish with it. What we want to help people do. There's always going to be people like Chris who comes up with a different way to make it work, and it'll be interesting to see how that comes up.
Oh, he's a hero. He's a technological guru.
I think the religion aspect is really interesting. Are you asking them just to designate as Christian or Muslim, or is it a specific denomination?
I think religion probably has the most choices. We don't dig too deep into denominations, but I think we've got evangelical and Catholic, and I think we may have Mormonism in there as well. We tried to get sort of the high level differences.
You have 15 choices.
Okay, yeah, and I think probably both the Sunni and Shiite Muslim is in there. I think we've got Buddhist, so there's a lot of choices in there. And again, we tried to be as comprehensive as we could without getting so deep into something that there's not a real fundamental difference between two different religious choices. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, what intrigues me about that, as someone who's Catholic, not that long ago, and in some circles, there is still some prejudice and some disdain against Catholics from other Christian denominations. And when John F. Kennedy was elected president, it was a landmark occurrence in the United States. There was a belief that no Catholic could get elected president. So I've kind of grown up with that, particularly being a Black Catholic in the Panhandle city of Tallahassee, where I've said before, we knew the 6 Black Catholic families that lived in Tallahassee, and
how many were you related to?
We weren't related to any of them, but
oh my gosh, how exciting!
I'm telling you, we could name them all. It was kind of remarkable, and particularly from other African Americans who are Baptist or AME. There was this disdain. I even ran into it when I was in college. So I've always kind of been intrigued by that, and I've had some conversations to Heath, bridge that divide, and I've had some success.
Yeah, that's great. And that's it, because we know what we're told usually about people who are different than us, and very often we don't know anybody in that box, whatever the box is, but we know what we're told, and we assume that it's all true. and we believe what makes sense to us, and we our own biases come into all that and everything. But yeah, you really want to know the answer, then you talk to somebody who's in that identity. So I mean, yeah, I don't know a lot about Catholicism, but I would guess that Black Catholic is a pretty small piece of the whole thing, right?
Well, in the South, particularly in Florida, in northern enclaves, and in New Orleans, there are many African American Catholics. But where I grew up in Tallahassee, there were not at all. So.
I have to say, this is as close to a dating app, because I met my husband when I was 21. This is as close to a dating app as anything I've ever been close to. So for all of you who have been partnered up for a long time, I'm looking at you, Hooper. It's so nice. It's like, who would you like to talk to? And you can find out, I could talk to AA. Well, I don't want to give people screen names out. Who's a male, independent. He's Caucasian and heterosexual. Am I into it? I don't know. Maybe. If not, I just keep scrolling. I mean, we can get the experience that so many of our peers have had that we have not had the privilege of diving down into. No pun intended.
Chris, this is the part where you mentioned when you were asked Heath if Deneen is on the.
Well, I was going to ask you about going back to your college. If you ever walked over a bridge with Deneen? Because you started reminiscing about your college days.
That's really good.
Yeah, I think I may have.
You never have. That's always. Well, okay. The big takeaways are Carla has worked in sports and politics.
Wait, is walking over a bridge a euphemism? I thought he meant literally walking over a bridge.
I thought he meant walking over a bridge too. I was getting there.
Okay.
That today is Chris and I's friendiversary. When we went public, we changed our status.
You should read my Facebook post that I wrote that day.
It was beautiful, and you shared it with me before you posted it, and I thought
it was a tearjerker. Brought tears to my eyes typing that out.
Yeah, tears of joy, because I wasn't running against you.
And little did I know that you would literally be calling me every day of my life after.
Okay, just for the record, as I'm trying to wrap our show up after we've had this dynamic guest and this very robust conversation. Yeah, we talked on the phone like 4 times today, but who reached out to who first this morning?
But, looking back, had you just run and I would have beaten you, we wouldn't have had this wonderful podcast, and I wouldn't have had a great friend. I mean, we would have been friends, but not friends like we are now.
Yeah, because nobody except for you
your feelings
and
would have been hurt after I beat you.
It's so cute that you think that. And so that's all part of the charm.
We need you, Heath.
Yeah.
We need you to make some bridges.
Well, I mean, you got to think about it. These two do it well, and you listen to them bicker. So the people who don't do it well are just throwing lightning bolts at each other all day long, Yeah. So, that's what we're trying to do, is give people a chance to do it better and be better for it.
Hey, so before we wrap up, just one more question. What was the genesis of this idea?
Yeah, honestly, it started before the last presidential election. My kids and I just talking about just how polarized everything was, how political everything was, and it's only gotten worse since then, obviously. But at the time, we thought it was going to go the other way, like I think most people did. And we said, when that happens, these people that have risen up behind Trump are going to be angry, and they're going to feel unheard and bitter and all these other things. We need a place to connect them with someone on the other side and heal some of those wounds. So that was sort of the first idea. Now, obviously, the election went the other way. That just meant the anger was on the other side and so on. But there's always the differences. And like I said, the platforms that we have exacerbate those differences more often than not, and make our disagreements worse than they need to be and than they should be. So we're just trying to sort of counteract that and kind of make the world a better place, one conversation at a time.
Very nice. Very nice. All right, Heath. So we at Dishonorable Mention wholeheartedly believe that your entire life is defined by what was the number one song on your 14th birthday.
Okay.
So I've done a little research, and I am, I'm starting to really believe this. The number one song on your birthday was "Black or White" by Michael Jackson. Isn't that interesting?
That's awesome.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Dang.
So
Mic
cool.
drop.
That's good
That's
stuff. I had
amazing.
no idea. I was thinking Bon Jovi. I don't know, late 80s, I guess. But that's great. It's perfect.
Wait,
Man.
I
think Ernest needs to sing that a little bit.
Didn't I? Did you say late?
You know he loves his Michael.
Well, 74. So 14th birthday in November of 74. So that would have been 88, right? 14 years.
Oh, I got that wrong.
Oh, you got it wrong.
All right, well, sing it anyways, Ernest. Sing it
I
anyways.
think that all day.
I thought you said 77.
No, I'm older than that, sadly.
And you said November?
November 7th.
I got that completely wrong. God, I don't even want to say what it is.
Now it's so perfect.
I know. Let's just stick with that.
Okay, I'll take it.
We won't mention that it was actually Kokomo by the Beach Boys.
But that's a song that invites everyone to come on down.
That's right.
Black and White wants us to look at the differences. Heath wants everyone to come under his big, beautiful tent and his long table and have a good conversation. Come on down to Kokomo.
I like it.
All right, that'll work.
So are y'all ready for a great Florida man story?
Yes, Chris, give us a Florida man story.
So this one,
after that, we'll all do shout outs. So you might want to think about who you want to give a shout out to. But
so
first,
this
the Florida
one
man story
is from May 7th, but this story happened on May 5th, 2019. So it
I love how Chris takes this with such integrity of getting it right.
No, I did research today for this.
Oh,
and
gosh.
it's from CBS 4 Miami. And it's one of the better ones that we've done.
Man, you're really pulling out all the stops for our anniversary.
No, it's a good one. F it, I'm drunk. Take me to jail. Florida man crashes lawnmower into police car. So basically, this guy was drunk on his lawnmower and decided to drive it home and crashed into a police car that was stationary. And the officer walks out and sees the guy on his lawnmower crashed into his police car. And that's when the gentleman who was in his 70s said, F it, I'm drunk, take me to jail.
I thought for sure this was a Matt Gaetz story until you said he was in his 70s. But okay, so that's.
No, if it was Matt Gaetz, he would have said, "My dad is Don Gates."
So I'm gonna take. I was gonna say Fort Walton Beach because that's who I assumed we were talking about. But I'm gonna go with something that will be wrong because I always am. I'm gonna go with Jacksonville.
Ooh, that's interesting. I'm going to go with Vero Beach.
I'll go with Naples.
Heath, do you have feelings, or do you feel like you're?
I'm going to be a homer and say not a specific city, but Polk County.
Okay, a bit of a cop out, but you're new here.
Oh my goodness, folks! This is the first time that we have had one exactly right.
Oh my god!
Oh my god! I don't even know what to say. Hold on.
I mean, we need some music. We need some music.
I feel like I won.
We all won. It's gonna be Heath. What?
Yeah, Heath won.
Oh my god!
Wow.
Very Polk
He
County.
has bridged the gap. Holy moly!
The answer is Haines City.
Why?
Okay. I grew up in Lake Wales, so Haines City is just down the road.
So Haines City is in Polk County, correct?
Yes, it is. It is in Imperial Polk County.
Oh, this is such a special day.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Man, we have never, ever, and we still have never gotten it right, but our guest did, and that counts for something.
That counts for something.
That needs to go in the highlight reel.
Yeah, for sure. Carla and I felt like we were at a pageant and they kept calling people and we were still standing there and one of us was getting the crown. And then we looked at Heath, both longingly, supportively, and a little bit jealously.
So true.
I look great in a crown, so that's all right.
I respect that.
All right. Shout outs. Who wants to go first?
Ooh, I'll go first. I am eating a wonderful cheese platter from Haven for dinner tonight, and they are just wonderful. They were our guest last week, and I love them. So thanks, Haven.
I'll go next. I'd like to give a shout out to Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Not for anything she necessarily did politically, but Gretchen Whitmer was portrayed by Cecily Strong on Saturday Night Live. It was hilarious. If you haven't seen it, you should go look it up. And in this message that she was delivering to the state of Michigan, as Gretchen Whitmer, Cecily Strong is drinking a Labatt's beer. And so Gretchen Whitmer, showing a real sense of humor, sent Cecily Strong a whole box of Michigan items, including some beer brewed in Michigan, and informed Cecily Strong that the next time she portrays her, she should be drinking a Michigan beer and not a beer from Canada. So I thought that was just a touch of class. I give a shout out to Gretchen Whitmer. Chris?
Yeah. So as y'all know, the class of 2020 doesn't get to experience a lot of things that other graduating classes get to experience. So I'm highlighting a different school each week in my district. This week I'm highlighting the Clearwater High School class of 2020. And I just wanted to mention a couple of their students. Destiny Turner is their valedictorian. She has the third highest GPA in all of Pinellas County.
Wow.
And she has a full ride scholarship to Princeton. Congratulations, Destiny. I can assure y'all that she's probably the smartest one out of all of us. And closely behind her.
That ain't saying a lot.
Well, yeah.
Hey, Heath got the Florida man story.
Right.
That is true. That is true. Closely behind Destiny, in the salutatorian, there was like 2 100ths of a point difference between the valedictorian and the salutatorian, if I did the decimal points correctly, was Rent Monty. And Rent Monty had the 5th highest GPA in the entire school district in Pinellas County. So their scores were very close. But in addition to his achievements in the classroom, he also was Clearwater High School's starting quarterback for their football team the past few years, and he led the Tornadoes to the playoffs this year.
Where's he going to school?
He is going to Lafayette to play football and, of course, to continue his education.
Nice Patriot League school. That's a good call. Well, that's nice, Chris. I'm glad you're doing that. I saw that on your Facebook page. Very nice. Becca, you have a shout out.
I do. I'm not opting for the airing of the grievances tonight. I'm feeling full of love and joy. And maybe that's partially because, as we mentioned in brief earlier, but it bears repeating, today was Giving Tuesday, and I know we all participated. I personally was honored to support several organizations, including the Guardian Ad Litem Foundation that serves Pinellas and Pasco counties, the American Cancer Society, which we all supported, in love of our boy Hoop, as well as Gulf Coast Jewish Family and Community Services, which I'm proud to serve on the board of 2 of those, the one that Hooper does not work at. But most of all, I know this is a really difficult time for our communities and for individuals. And so for all of you who gave or give, I know it was harder this time. And so I give a shout out to anybody who is able to make a gift, because it's especially meaningful to our organizations right now. And we need them
Becca,
more than ever.
Can we go around and do a roundtable on what organizations we gave to today?
It's our podcast. We can do whatever we want.
I guess we can. Good job. Okay. So you gave, do you want to just like list them, or how do you want this to work?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I gave to Gulf Coast, to the Guardian Ad Litem Foundation, and the Cancer Society today.
Cool.
And maybe some more in a few moments when you guys get me in the fields with whatever you did.
Cool. I gave to the Junior League of Tampa Diaper Bank Drive and Annual Fund. They provide over 80,000 diapers for women and children and families in need. And we keep increasing that goal every couple of months. So it's really important to know this is a sustained effort. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to give $20 and then, forget about it. I mean, kids obviously go through diapers, like water, so they need it. I also
quite literally
quite literally. I gave to an organization in Santa Barbara providing housing for homeless people. And my friend Waleed is department chair at UCSB and was gracious enough to promote that on his Facebook page. So I gave to that. And I also gave to Bat World Sanctuary in Australia, which provides care for orphaned and injured bats. Some of them get released into the wild, and some of them need to live out their care. They can last up to 30 or 40 years because they live a long time and in captivity. So I gave to that.
And I gave to the American Cancer Society.
Oh, I gave to that too.
I gave to the American Cancer Society, and I also gave to the Florida Institute for Community Studies, which is headed by my friend Elaine Unterberger, and they provide a lot of social services in town and country and Waimama to underserved communities, and particularly migrants and Hispanic families. Heath, did you give to anyone?
Not yet.
He got the answer right. So Becca's going to give a $20 donation to the charity of your choice.
Yeah. I know you well enough to know you're not going to pick something heinous like Chris would. So feel free to.
The Donald Trump campaign, is that where you want to your donation to go to?
I don't answer that, Heath.
Yeah.
Don't answer that.
It wouldn't be that one. But yeah. So we can talk about that, Becca, if you want to.
Yeah. Tell us what charity is near and dear to your heart.
I don't know that it's a charity, but if you talk about near and dear to my heart, I mean, I think one of the organizations that does some of the most important work in the nation is the ACLU. And it's something that I've supported in the past. So that would certainly be one of them. Charity wise, I think I would lean toward things that are helping poor people, whether it's, food assistance or anything along those lines. There's not enough help for folks that are sort of below the radar in our nation. And I think that anything you can do is good.
I think that's great.
And did you have a shout out, Heath?
You guys were all over the map. I was hoping for a theme so I could jump on it, but just to
that's us every episode, Heath, all over the map.
Yeah.
we're the Rand McNally of podcasts.
So I was going to call it.
That was so not cool, Ernest. That was painful. Sorry. I'm sorry, Heath. I had to judge him publicly.
So I was going to call it a couple shows that have been getting me through the quarantine time on the binge watching, if that's okay.
Please.
Sure.
The one that my wife and I just finished and just blew me away. I think it's probably the best show I've ever seen is called Afterlife with Ricky Gervais. He writes it and stars in it, and it's phenomenal about a guy who lost his wife and is really suffering and has changed him and his life and his relationship with everybody and kind of working through that. It's amazing. It's not gonna. I mean, there's laughs in it, but it's not a comedy by any stretch. For those who think of him in the Office context, but he's fantastic, and the show is just amazing. It deals with so many really deep themes and things. On a lighter note, we just started watching that show on Prime, Upload, which is a lot of fun and is raising all kinds of crazy ideas about what our future is going to hold when technology catches up to our dreams a little bit.
All right. Very good. Well, that's going to do it for another episode of Dishonorable Mention. We want to thank our very special guest, Heath Fogelman from Bridges. It is an app that allows one-on-one conversations between people from different perspectives. You want to learn more, go to makebridges.com. Heath, thank you for joining us. And thank you, my podcast partners. I love you guys. I always appreciate your support. And now it's time for everyone to say goodbye. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.